thank you for coming today. It's going to be a gorgeous day out when you leave. It'll be 50 degrees out when you leave, I promise. So I just wanted to thank you for coming. How many have been here before? Just second Saturdays? Kids, why didn't you raise your hand? You've never been here before? Do you realize there's cookies in the back? Just saying. Okay. Are you here for extra credit? No? You're just here because? Wow, that's great. All right, good. Give them a round of applause. I bet you're here for extra credit, right? Yeah. And not you, the kid behind you. Are you here for extra credit? Mr. Pavlak? Are you in Mr. What about you in the back? Extra credit? Mr. Pavlak? Did you guys do something wrong or anything you want to talk about? I know your parents are here, but we won't get you in trouble. Yeah, I know, he's not listening. All right, so next month, we're going to be having the history of Trombley House, which is the house that the Historical Museum owns over in Vets Park. And after the lecture next month, you can take a trip over to the Trombley House and do a tour of the Trombley House next month. Extra credit, Mr. Pavlak? Yeah. Just checking. He's not here, so I'm just letting you know. But I'll tell him you're here, though. Okay. So next month, Mr. Pavlak is a teacher at Handy Middle School, and he sends all his kids here. Yeah, must be. So, she's eating cookies. That's a good one. And then, so next week is History of Trombley House, and then you can do a tour right after. And then in May, we're going to have a birthday party here. We'll wait. I'm kidding. We're going to have a birthday party here. The museum is going to be 100 years old. So we're going to have a cake and ice cream and all sorts of stuff after that event on May 11th. And then we're going to take June, July, and August off. In September, we're going to have the history of the Agawa, which is a boat that came over and I believe probably sank, which most boats do when they come this way. And then in October, I want a show of hands. How many knew that Jackie Robinson, the baseball player, had ties to Bay City? You did? You've heard about it. What do you know about it? You have no clue, but he does.
My son told me.
No. And so you gotta believe that, you know. Your son told you so. So Jackie Robinson actually has history ties to Bay City with a law firm, and so we're going to hear from a couple of lawyers on Jackie Robinson's ties to Bay County, and then in November we're going to have the history of Santa House. So Mrs. Claus will be here with, you know, maybe Mr. Claus, I don't know, we'll see, or one of the helpers. So, but without further ado, let's talk about today. We have Mike Mosher, who is an instructor at Saginaw Valley, who's done a lot of murals. He walked in yesterday and went, wow, look at this mural right here of the tapestry. So, without further ado, Mr. Mike Mosher.
Thank you, Mike. Today I'm going to talk about some of my murals, philosophy of community murals, and most of all, my students' murals, especially the downtown history panels that are on Saginaw Street on the Bayshire Academy. Now, my parents were Goldwater, Jerry Ford Republicans. However, my mother had a framed postcard from her student trip to Mexico of Pancho Villa as painted by Diego Rivera. And I began painting murals in high school in Ann Arbor. My father was an engineer, and he wanted me to see Rivera's Detroit industry cycle in the Detroit Institute of Arts. So we saw that. I attended Dartmouth College, which has the greatest mural cycle in the United States by Jose Clemente Orozco, another one of Los Tres Grandes, the three big Mexican muralists, Rivera being the first. And I was fortunate to study with the African-American muralist John Onye Lockard, and this is his from a cycle at the Manoogian Center, Wayne State University in Detroit. Now, it's very important to me that art be rooted in community, that it's not, I don't believe art for art's sake has any purpose anymore, that art is seen by people and so needs to relate to people. I went to San Francisco and was there at the right time during a real movement of community murals. And I painted this work in a housing project where the people were very proud that they were multicultural, that Filipinos, Latinos, white and black were all living harmoniously together. So they emphasized that as something that was their community, their neighborhood. So that's how I interpreted it. A couple more projects. I ended up getting a position as a muralist for the San Francisco Art Commission. And at age 25, I was officially recognized as an artist by a great American city. You can imagine how great I felt about that. And I think I was getting something like $1,500 a month to do that. And I went around to different neighborhoods and finding out what they needed. The art commission would be called and send me out. St. Peter's School, a Catholic school in a Latin American neighborhood, it's Club Latino, wanted me to help them to put together a project. And that was fun because it was supposed to be the middle school students I was working with. Well, when the guys started hanging around, all the girls would be distracted and want to stop painting. So their little 10-year-old sisters would be saying, "There's an open brush, can we paint now?" So the project was generated, the imagery by them, and I'll talk about that process of generating the imagery. The neighborhood got a commission to do some murals on an entertainment strip that now has our movie theaters and bookstores and coffee houses. So I looked back into the history of the neighborhood, and there had been a Pacific Coast League baseball team, the Mission Reds, that played in a stadium that was a block away. There was a 19th century amusement park called Woodward's Gardens, a private park that was 2 blocks from the site. So I thought, okay, I'll mash those two together and motifs from both of them and create this mural of the baseball team. Show how people interpret art through their own lenses. The original team was all white guys, but the neighborhood wasn't white anymore, so I thought, okay, I'll create a range of faces. One day, one woman walked by and looked at it and said, "Oh, they're so dark. Was this a Negro Leagues team?" A little later, another woman walked by and said, "Another mural, all white people." So you have an artist, a community muralist, has to go by their conscience, do their best. But as I said, people will always interpret art differently. I was commissioned by the city's hospital for immobilized people, either in chairs or in gurneys. So this was a chance to do something very complex. People who were brought into that room had a lot of time to look at the imagery. So I started thinking about all the different kinds of music that had been played in San Francisco over the years. And so I mixed motifs from the 19th century, the 20th century, my own sketchbook, musician friends, into a series on the city's music. I'm sorry if the graphics are a bit crunchy from a JPEG blown up. My last project in San Francisco, after I'd been working in the computer industry for a few years, was approached by an owner of a building on Market Street who was very proud that his neighborhood, his few blocks, had been a center of entertainment, of labor organizing, and politics. It was only a few blocks from City Hall. And he said to me, Mike, why don't you pull out imagery from 1880 to about 1930? I want you to make it look like an old newspaper cartoon. And as well as community murals, I teach comics at SVSU. I believe there's much in common with the media. Anyway, Nate Berkowitz was offering a budget that I thought, take a long time to paint on large panels. Why don't I just draw a cartoon in ink and blow up 8-inch to 8-foot panels, 14 to 12 inches to 12 feet. So I did that. And you have a big labor march with various notables from labor history in San Francisco. You have politics panel with various mayors, some of whom were impeached and some who were reformers. And you have vaudeville that was very active on the street, old theaters, and a guy who had a blimp called the Slug floating over San Francisco at one point. So it was a fun project. But then I moved to Michigan, got my job teaching at Saginaw Valley. Okay, before that though, some definitions about community murals and the taxonomy of these different art forms and their different virtues. Public art at its worst is parachute art. Suddenly falls into place, nobody knows how it got there. It was chosen by a panel of experts for the benefit of the public. Community art can be any media, but generated by a group that feels like it hasn't, its interests, its history has not been visualized sufficiently or articulated. Murals are basically related to the site, if not painted on the site, installed in that and designed for that specific site. Not just a big painting. A big painting can be nice, but why stop there? And more recently, the nebulous term street art has grown to include posters and stencils and stickers and various interventions by artists one way or another, usually on their own initiative. So the community murals is the part that's interested me the most. And when I got to mid-Michigan, it appeared there was work to be done. Now, my process asks the question, can art be democratic? How can the expertise of an artist, almost like a consulting engineer, work with the expertise of a neighborhood, of a group, of a community, of people who are going to live with the work and interact with it on a daily basis. So they very much need to be integrated into the process. Now the first, as a 9-step process, I call the tennis game because it bounces back and forth between artist and community. It begins with the community, desires a mural on that site and thinks that this is a place that we want this large artwork. Next step, the artist comes in, begins the dialogue, shows historical examples, starts to hear about them, offers some solutions, gets their feedback from what he or she shows. Then the group together brainstorms ideas, puts it together maybe as a collage. They bring in imagery, just get it up on the wall, make notes, written notes, start to think about what it could be. Then the artist uses design skills to put it together as a something coherent, something cohesive that makes sense visually. Then the group critiques it. No, don't include that. Hey, that reminds me of Mr. Jones, who used to live around here. Let's put him in the mural. And more, the community has something visual to work off of to bring about more ideas. Then the specialist, the artist, draws it on the wall. This is often a stage that if novices do that without drawing training, the process breaks down. So the artist hopefully has the drawing skills to quickly realize it on the wall. Maybe start drawing it in paint so they can actually see this is going to happen. Next stage, the group does the heavy lifting. In my case, students doing it, the house painting stage. That's getting the wall covered with paint appropriately under the direction of the artist. And there have been times, projects I'll show you with youth, when there'd be an empty space up near the top. Was going to be this guy, and I thought, oh, I hope that tall high schooler on the basketball team shows up today to paint that. And instead, there are only, 7-year-olds who show up, and so we get a really ornate pattern on the rug under the figures. So that kind of adaptability of the process, it's a lot of fun, but it takes constant decision making. That the mural is not just transferred from the start, it grows and adapts as the community is involved in the process. Then, very often, the artist needs to do the finishing touches. I need to jump in and Mosherize here and there in order to tie it together and give a unity to the outlines here and there, bring something forward, push something back. Last of all, the group celebration. And everybody is proud of our mural that has been completed. Sometimes this triggers a neighborhood to start thinking about other things. Hey, we got this project finished, maybe we can get a stoplight on that dangerous corner. excuse me, a political process continues, political in the best sense of the word. So that's my tennis game model. I brought it to Michigan, and at SVSU began working with my students, working with youth in, say, in this case, in Saginaw, which has been very receptive to our projects. And students like to be working and getting feedback from somebody other than their gruff professors who they've seen for several classes already on their artwork. Trinity Center, which unfortunately is closed, had an after-school program, and we worked with their youth in creating a project that Rosa Parks is jumping off the bus in order to welcome people, especially students, to get on the bus to the university up the road. So besides the inner city kids getting to meet and talk with and work with college students, the messages, positive messages are reinforced in the mural. Good Neighbors Mission is a social service agency that we worked with twice. Some murals, digital project in the interior, sort of comparable to these lovely digital projects in this room, and then panels on the outside where they wanted messages such as stopping the violence and in Saginaw, and also eating properly. They wanted to encourage health. Zion Lutheran Church approached us for a project to celebrate their 125th anniversary. Now, this being Michigan, you don't really want to be out painting a big wall during the winter semester. So we broke it down into manageable plywood panels that could be painted in the classroom. This was much easier than students having to run to the site and back and make it to their next class. Our project in Bay City Central were some panels for the writing center. And then we did big banners, 20 feet wide, digital collages for Saginaw High. This included the results, self-portrait workshops that my students did with the high schoolers. So we figured out how to incorporate those in these banners for the banner style murals, digital, hung in the Saginaw High cafeteria. Our largest project was digital vinyl piece for the Dow Event Center that has a river running through 4 motifs of community, downtown business, education, and the waterfront. Then working with students in First Ward Center, created panels about things that they thought they wanted to see improved in Saginaw: transportation, community, political involvement, and education. Now, discussion began in 2017, I believe, with Ms. Candace Bales about a project in downtown Bay City. She proposed several sites, big walls. I thought one on the upper right, well, there was already a prominent mural that would steal thunder of any project to put behind it. And the other ones demanded scaffolding or window watching equipment. Again, not the best thing to do in winter. But the Bayshire Building with those boarded up windows were promising. Now, when the interior digital project in Good Neighbors Mission was installed, the newsman who covered it was Eric Jylha, who's, as you know, very closely involved with this institution and a great storyteller. So he came to my class and entranced the students with notables of Bay City history and enthusiastic discussion of the history of our town. And then it was up to my students to interpret it. So they came up with 10 panels that would fit the windows. Now remember my hospital murals that were cut out, the contours determined by the figures within. Thought that would be a good solution for those big brown windows. And okay, if they're 8 foot tall, plywood up there, maybe about 6.5 feet by about 3.5 feet would fit nicely in those windows. So the class worked up a group of maquettes. We determined a color palette so there would be unity among different panels. There were 9 students in the class, 10 windows, so divvied it up. Each person was responsible for one, but most of all responsible to the group. So all the panels would play nice together. And of course the community that we were responsive to, representatives from Studio 23, from Downtown Development Management Board, and Eric came to give us feedback, fortunately approval, of our maquettes. So plywood was obtained and saws were sharpened and paint was mixed and distributed, so everybody had a yogurt container full of each color, and we were off. One panel was devoted to sports. Terry McDermott, championship skater from here, was celebrated. He appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show the same night as this new band from England for all you young people, the Beatles. And there's a video on YouTube that you can see of that performance. Terry was announced from the audience to stand up for applause. Story goes that while they were waiting in the green room, he gave the Beatles a trim, just to, John, let me tighten up those bangs. And so the Beatles are there cheering him on. Matthew Massey, who's the son of a prominent Detroit muralist who worked on this panel, he liked the stories of the Negro Leagues game playing. Maybe that's Jackie Robinson. So he has a ball player, and we have a bicyclist to celebrate the bicycle industry in turn-of-the-century Bay City. Next panel is a Civil War veterans parade, and we added fireworks because Bay City loves its fireworks. Annie Edson Taylor, Queen of the Mist, first lady to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. And First person. Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you. And you can still see the barrel, or you could when I was a kid, in the Niagara Falls Museum. And so she was celebrated. Next, Hilda Mueller, boat racer, aviatrix. She's flying into Clements Field in the background. So those two are celebrated. Now, we were thinking about industry in Bay City and employment. And you'll see we celebrate the lumbering industry, but women at that time, if women were employed, they were domestics. So thought of celebrating domestics. And someone saw this mural and said, well, you know, how come the domestics always pictured as a black woman? Well, a black woman from Detroit painted this. So she identified with the Polish and Irish girls who were probably employed as domestics in Bay City. I know our 1913 house has in the center of the dining room a hole where there used to be a button to summon the serving girl. You know, Bridget, the tureen, please. I keep tapping and nothing happens. Also, next one, celebrating the lumberman and shipbuilding, home building, was masterminded by Eric Jylha, and it floating down the river on the way to the sawmill. You notice the motif of water running through almost all of these. We wanted to keep that as a sort of running joke through it. Madonna, and she is leading the tall ships procession. Now, the woman who designed this, she remembered Madonna's cone bra by Jean-Paul Gaultier, the avant-garde fashion designer. So Madonna's removed one of her cones to use as a spyglass. Next to it, commemoration of the 1865 fire, in which firemen had to jump in the river to rescue livestock as well as people's pets. Now, this was painted by a Saudi woman. We have a considerable number of Saudi students who come to attend SVSU. And I looked at it and said, Zainab, you painted an Arab fireman. And she said, oh, I guess you're right. Now, Dolly Hill had an act where she kept leopards, and unfortunately, one killed her and bit through her throat. Her last words to her assistant were, don't let them hurt the cats. And she's juxtaposed with the human fly, who was a traveling act, and he visited Bay City. I guess he climbed City Hall, and at one point he'd pretend he was slipping so the crowd would gasp. And he always did it in fine shoes and a suit as well. So he's up there approaching Dolly, and our water motif is a spilled glass. Now, the 10th panel I had a class of 10 students, so I said, okay, I'll do a panel. I did mine a week ahead of their deadlines. And that was a good strategy, because in doing so, they were able to see, okay, I want you to make sure the imagery goes out to the edge. I want you to use a 1-inch brush for any outlines. I want you to brush out the paint. You're not painting a barn or a mailbox. You want it the white of the white ground that we painted on first of all to show through and give the panel light. So a lot of painting technique I was able to demonstrate by kind of being the first among equals and getting the panel done. And I think that, I realized that pedagogically was a good result. All of these SVSU murals, I have to realize that what I'm being entrusted by the state of Michigan to do is to teach and to teach the Community Murals class. So I have to think in terms of my students are the most important part, and as we're responsible to community who lives among the mural as well. But so if you go to the webpage of the art department, you'll see these murals listed under CIRE, which I call Community Arts Research, because I want this kind of project to be continually, besides teaching them, teaching me something about teaching, something about murals. I've known too many muralists in San Francisco who painted the same mural over and over again for 30 years, kind of resting on their laurels. And I believe that because of the interests and under-celebrated diversity interests in this area, that it'll continually be a research process. So there's my panel, the panel with question mark and the Mysterians, and you can see crying perhaps more than 96 tears, and behind them another band that needs some celebration in our town, the Bay City Rollers. And they're pictured in the pub in Scotland with their pints, and they're throwing a dart at a map of the US. Of course, instead of the whole US, just Michigan, just the important part, and they hit Bay City. So I'm always thinking of where there needs to be a mural. I pitched to the Temple Theater, one celebrating entertainment and arts in this area, with the patrons, the late Dr. Shaheen and his wife at the bottom, the blues woman Sherry Williams in a Stevie Wonder shirt. People are still proud Stevie came from Saginaw, flanked by Question Mark and the guitarist Dick Wagner. And the decorative figures are the Williams sisters playing tennis, because they're fine and excellent, and the spirit of Theodore Rutke as a cherub, inspiring the scene as well. So as you can see, I see history as something flexible. History to be adapted, to be messed with. It will always be in contention. There will always be multiple viewpoints of how history should be interpreted. And that's the way it should be. it is porous, it is not unitary, and that, as they say, is the process. But the point is to get people thinking about history, people wanting to research Hilda Mueller more, as they appreciate the decorative qualities as well. Another one I thought of last year, I thought, and you can tell this is like a napkin sketch dashed off. I added a little color so you could see it. Having, an outrage that Confederate flags were displayed, having the superheroes, Wonder Woman, Thor, Captain America, and Black Panther knocking over the trucks and obliterating the flags. Now, murals are problematic, difficult. I am quite critical of the Matisse in Saginaw. Is that supposed to celebrate Matisse's many years painting in our region? Saginaw is, about half black. How come one of the women isn't black in it? Most of all, I don't like the message that art is something that comes from over there, from Europe, and Michigan people should just put it up as an icon, an idol, and worship it. No art will ever come from our parts. That seems to be the subtle message behind a project like that, unintentionally, of course. The muralist, Saginaw's muralist, Eric Jylha, is an interesting character. He painted a memorial project. He comes out of the graffiti tradition. He just goes out there and does it, generally, though he's done some projects, organized projects as well, on White's Bar and the one for the baseball team, the Saginaw Old Golds. So he wanted to memorialize a friend of his who was shot in a mistaken identity shooting, and so he painted him on a wall. And there's a tradition of memorial murals in cities when people are suffering an untimely death. He also, on his own initiative, went out, painted that positive message. Imagine peace, love, hope, Saginaw. And that building was torn down. And last year, the substitute that went up on the same block, I just see as a lot of missed opportunity. The mural is so small that it's dwarfed by the emptiness of the space above it. If only they had done a project that went all the way to the top of the building, you wouldn't notice all the empty space. That mural I showed you in Holly Courts, the interlinked faces, I was actually only paid to do an 8-foot strip along the bottom. But a photographer friend took a photo of my maquette and he did a close-up of just a few faces, and I realized, whoa, the few faces would command the entire wall. So I used some of my fee to get scaffolding to command the entire wall. I believe a good mural should command its site, as Eric's does there. And various design issues and stuff. As I said, I lament that it could have been kicking off something, a good series of murals in that city. But then again, this is an ongoing process and continually reinventing itself. So the question that any community muralist should ask when approaching a group, not what do you want to see? That will only get received images. Oh, I really liked Spider-Man movie last week. Let's put Spider-Man up there. Oh, I really like that mural across town that shows this notable. Let's put that notable there. If you ask the group what's important to you, it shakes down virtues or vices, things they don't like, that then an artist can sift and turn into visual form. Now, last of all, in a community mural, the community part is as important or more so than the art part. That mural of the interlinked faces was painted over only a few months after it went up, along with a group of other murals, including new murals, in that housing project. Ironically, I got more press for being the guy who was painted over than just another muralist in San Francisco. And it also resulted in muralists putting together a new contract with greater protection, at least from projects on city property. I felt bad though. I put a lot of sweat into it, did my best, wasn't there anymore. A while later, about a year later, I was riding on a bus. And these guys, who were early in the morning, or on a cold, chilly morning, were out passing a bottle. They were laid off from the shipyards in San Francisco, so they helped us set up our scaffolding. They would set it up. You let us do it for you. This is our job. And they'd jump on it. Yeah, this is solid. They said, hey, it's Mike, the murals dude. Hey man, how come you don't come by Holly Courts anymore? You got friends there. And I said, yeah, I felt really bad though. It was painted over. And they said, don't worry about it. City screws everybody. You did good though, and we want you to come hang with us. So I realized that it's about the people. It's about, again, politics in the best sense of the word, of interaction and expression of people, as in Bay City, as up the street on our history panels. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? I'll ask it.
Do you have any more projects in mind?
Well, I'll be teaching Art 433 Community Murals in winter 2020. So we should stir some up. I think I went quickly over the murals that were BATS project. That's a collaboration with business, art, theater, and sociology professors who decided that we should collaborate to instruct each class in the other's concerns to generate the best possible urban murals. So in answer to your question, we better start stirring something up soon. Mary.
Apart from somebody painting over it, does like the transient nature of the mural bother you? It just seems like an incredible amount of work for something to get rained on.
Yeah, but right now, the current U.S. president is trying to undo everything the previous one did. It seems to be politics as usual. If you get out there, if you make your mark, you can get erased. And yeah, it's not a happy thing. At one point, when I was working for Apple Computer, a project I'd done the graphics for about 3 months was canceled. And so I told the manager about my mural, the mural tragedies as well. And so you gotta move on. Next question.
I have a question. How long do murals last? What, do you have to put a preservative over the top of them?
Well, the ones up the street we varnished, covered with acrylic varnish that we used as the medium. So it remains to be seen. That's an outdoor project in Michigan, so we shall see. My suggestion to you, sir, is that when they start looking a little ratty, then you should lobby the downtown management board for restoration of them. And way in the back.
How many colors, like if you're gonna paint a mural, like say you're painting this one, how many of these colors can you do at a time?
Well, in the fresco process that Rivera used in Detroit, you could only paint a certain amount before plaster dried. It's not really like printmaking in that where you lay down the red, silk screening, you lay down the red, then you lay down the blue, etc. You can, if you've got multiple brushes, you can dip those in different colors at in your same painting session, your same afternoon. What I appreciate about this one that you pointed out, the digital replica of the weaving, is the limited number of colors. A limited number of colors gives unity visually, just as the sepia, grisé, when something's done just in gray, it's called grisé, but this is all a sepia tone of this mural, has a unity. So very often a problem with novices' murals are too many colors haphazard. I remember one of my professors in grad school said, "Mike, I look at these paintings of yours, it looks like you just took a color you like, put a little bit here, put a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here." And I said, "Yeah, your point." That just seemed like the way to get a unified composition, color.
Bay City's experience has been with Terry Dickinson, who did a lot of our murals. I was wondering if you ever had any collaboration with him.
No, but I met him.
Oh, you
Yes.
met him, okay. All right. The other thing I'm thinking about, and I mentioned to my friend, those murals almost look like there's light shining on them or coming from the back. It's very interesting how you got that
Well, that's the glazing technique, using acrylic but adding a lot of medium to it. So it's then brushed out as color. That was actually a technique the old masters used. They would paint a painting entirely in burnt umber, but then have color glazes over it, a very transparent paint in different colors. More questions?
All right, thank you, Mike.